Your neighbor knows things about your dog that you don't. They know what time the barking starts. They know how long it lasts. They know which days are worse. They've heard things through the wall that you will never hear because you're never there when they happen. Most dogs look completely normal the moment you walk back through the door. Calm, maybe a little excited, acting like nothing happened, which from their perspective, nothing did. But you've seen the evidence. The sofa cushion on the floor, the corner of the rug that wasn't like that this morning. The very specific silence of a dog who knows something is different about the atmosphere when you walked in. You assumed it was boredom, maybe mischief, maybe just a bad day. But behavioral researchers have been doing something for decades that most owners haven't. They leave a camera running, walk out, and watch. And what those cameras capture, hour by hour, heartbeat by heartbeat, is one of the most revealing findings in animal psychology. Your dog isn't just missing you when you're gone. Something specific is happening in their brain, and it starts before you even close the door. In 2010, researchers at the University of Milan installed cameras in the homes of 23 dogs and left. Vocalization, barking, whining, howling began at an average of 3 minutes and 15 seconds after departure. Destructive behavior within 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's how long it takes before the shoes are at risk. But the more interesting finding was what came after. That first frantic phase, the barking, the door scratching, gradually subsides. And from the outside, if you came home to a quiet house and nothing visibly destroyed, you'd assume the dog had settled. It hadn't. What the cameras showed was that as vocalization decreased, panting increased, heart rate stayed elevated. The dog had shifted from one expression of distress to a different one. The noise stopped, but the physiological activation didn't. And researchers tracking behavior over longer periods found something even more telling. The pattern doesn't follow a clean decline. Every 23 to 28 minutes, there's a new spike. A renewed burst of movement or vocalization, followed by a quieter period, then another spike. Not settling, cycling. The silence between those spikes is not calm. Now compare that to what cameras capture in dogs without separation issues. Swedish researchers at the University of Agricultural Sciences left this group alone for up to 4 hours. These dogs spent approximately 97% of their time in passive behavior, lying down, resting, occasionally checking the water bowl. Not distressed, not bored, waiting. The difference between those two groups isn't breed, it isn't age, and it's barely even about genetics. The research points to one variable above almost all others, what the dog has been taught to expect. But before we get there, let's talk about what happens before you even leave. In the 1980s, veterinary behaviorists Borchelt and Voith documented something that has been confirmed repeatedly since. Dogs with separation anxiety often begin showing measurable stress responses while their owner is still in the house, not when the door closes, before the bag comes out. Through simple conditioning, dogs learn to chain your entire departure routine backwards. You check your phone, you put on your shoes, you glance at the time. Each of those actions, repeated hundreds of mornings in a row, has become a signal, and the signal means one thing: I'm about to be alone. By the time you reach the door, some dogs are already panting, some are pacing, some are following you from room to room, like they know exactly what's coming and are hoping, somehow, that this time you'll stay. There's a practical implication here that challenges a lot of popular advice. The standard recommendation for years has been to desensitize your dog to departure cues. Pick up your keys randomly throughout the day, put on your shoes, and then sit back down so those cues lose their meaning. Researchers at the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona reviewed this in 2014 and found the evidence more complicated than expected. Making departures unpredictable doesn't reduce fear for all dogs. For some, it increases it. Because the problem isn't the keys. The problem is the uncertainty about what happens after you go. Your dog isn't afraid of your shoes. They're afraid you won't come back. The Royal Veterinary College ran a longitudinal study called Generation Pup, tracking 145 dogs from adoption through their first 6 months of life. They were specifically looking for what predicted separation-related problems, and they found something that surprised a lot of trainers. Emotional goodbyes didn't cause it. Long farewells, big hugs at the door, the whole 5-minute production some of us do every morning, no significant effect. What mattered was the return. Dogs whose owners came home to find damage and responded with visible upset, raised voices, prolonged reactions, that visible frustration directed at the dog, were 6 times more likely to develop separation-related behaviors. The dog doesn't connect your frustration to the chair leg it destroyed 4 hours ago. There's no chain of causation available to them over that time window. What the dog connects your frustration to is your arrival, and gradually, your arrival becomes something to brace for. And here's why that matters. A dog that's anxious about you coming home is a dog that's more anxious about you leaving. The two ends of the absence get linked. You walk out, they panic. You walk back in, they panic again, for different reasons. The whole day becomes a loop of anticipatory stress. The same study found that early use of punishment, telling off, smacking, even deliberately ignoring, significantly increased the probability of separation problems developing. And the most common piece of advice owners receive when their dog struggles alone? Get a second dog. It has essentially no support in the research. A 2021 study of 77 dogs found that male dogs in multi-dog households actually vocalized more when left alone than single dogs. Because the separation isn't about loneliness in the general sense, it's about the specific absence of a specific person. A second dog doesn't fix that. It just means two dogs in the house having different problems. Somebody's neighbor is having a very long week. This is the part that gets missed most often, and it tends to get missed because the dog makes it easy to miss. You come home, the house is intact, no mess, no damage. Maybe your dog looks up from the sofa with an expression that says nothing in particular happened. You assume everything was fine. In the 1960s, Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania ran a series of experiments that would become foundational to psychology. Dogs were exposed to unavoidable shocks. Later, when escape was possible, most of those dogs didn't try. They lay down, accepted what was happening. He called it learned helplessness, the idea that organisms learn to stop acting when experience teaches them that their actions don't change outcomes. In a major revision of that theory in 2016, Seligman acknowledged he'd framed it backwards. Passivity isn't something animals learn. Passivity is the brain's default when it's under prolonged, inescapable stress. What has to be actively built is the belief that your behavior can change the situation. A dog that stops barking after an hour alone hasn't accepted the situation. It has stopped believing that its behavior matters. And there's a more recent layer to this. A 2019 study found that in severely anxious dogs, long-term cortisol, measured from hair samples reflecting months of hormonal accumulation, was sometimes lower than in calmer dogs. Not because they were less stressed, because their stress system had been running so long, it had started to burn out. The dog that seems fine might be the dog you need to worry about most. Here's something that rarely gets mentioned outside veterinary research, and should. In 2019, a team at Linköping University in Sweden measured long-term cortisol levels in 58 dog owner pairs. Not the cortisol spike of a bad moment, the slow hormonal accumulation over weeks and months, captured in hair samples. The levels were synchronized: stressed owner, stressed dog, calm owner, calm dog. When the researchers looked at the direction of that relationship, which one was driving the other, the answer was clear. The owner's cortisol was predicting the dog's, not the reverse. What this means, a dog already carrying a chronically elevated stress baseline doesn't start the separation from neutral, they start it from a deficit. The 8 hours you're gone aren't happening in isolation, they're happening on top of everything that's already accumulated. The product industry around separation anxiety is enormous. Pheromone diffusers, calming supplements, anxiety wraps, white noise machines. Most owners have tried at least one of them. Most owners will tell you the results were somewhere between modest and nothing. And that's because most of them are treating the 8 hours the owner is gone. The actual point of intervention is the other 16. Let's be specific about the evidence. Dog-appeasing pheromone diffusers, sold under the brand name Adaptil, showed no significant improvement in barking, scratching, whining, or heart rate in the most rigorous placebo-controlled studies. The TV left on shows no measurable effect versus silence. Puzzle toys provide minutes of engagement. For severely anxious dogs, they can backfire entirely. Once the food is gone, the dog registers that you're gone, and the real reaction begins. What does have consistent evidence is graduated exposure. Not leaving for 5 minutes and hoping for the best, starting with seconds. Walking to the door, coming back in, touching the handle, coming back in. Building a history of return so incrementally that the dog's nervous system has no chance to spike. It feels almost absurdly slow. Standing at your own front door for 30 seconds and then coming back inside doesn't feel like training. It feels like nothing. But what you're doing isn't teaching obedience. You're providing enough repetitions of the same sequence. You leave, you come back, that the dog's prediction system starts to update. Practitioners who use this approach consistently report the same tipping point. Once a dog can tolerate roughly 40 minutes of absence without distress, progress to 4 or 8 hours tends to follow relatively quickly. The 40-minute mark isn't special. It's just the point at which the dog has accumulated enough evidence to update their internal prediction. For more severe cases, a 229-dog clinical trial found that fluoxetine combined with behavior modification produced 73% improvement, compared to 51% for behavior modification alone. And a separate study found that treated dogs shifted what researchers called their cognitive bias, their tendency to interpret ambiguous situations pessimistically, toward a more neutral reading. The medication doesn't make them drowsy. It makes their brain more capable of forming new beliefs, which is the whole point. So here's what the cameras have been showing us for 30 years. Some dogs wait. Some dogs cycle through distress in 20-minute intervals for the entire duration of your absence. Some go quiet in a way that looks fine and isn't. And almost none of them connect what they're experiencing to anything you did wrong, or anything you can fix with a toy or a pheromone plug. What they're responding to is the absence of a specific nervous system, yours, the one that their own nervous system has been calibrated against, month by month, until your cortisol and theirs move in the same direction. The dogs that struggle most aren't badly trained. They just haven't yet learned, in their nervous system, not their brain, that the door opening and the door closing are the same event, just in different order. If this changed how you see what's happening while you're at work, subscribe and leave a comment. Does your dog show signs before you've even picked up your keys? A heartfelt thank you to everyone for the incredible support on the first video. I created this channel with so much love, hoping a handful of people might find it, but I never could have expected this level of response in my very first video. Thank you. This is just the beginning. See you in the next one, this time with a video for our cat lovers.